The deep blackness of space stretched on forever, but a single human ship slowly made its way through the stars. It was not a warship, not even a strong one. It was just a diplomatic craft sent by Earth. Inside the ship sat Luke, a young human chosen for the Zarelian peace program. He wasn't a soldier or a scientist. He was a simple explorer, kind, curious, and honest. And that was exactly why he had been picked. His mission was simple: visit the capital planet of the Zarelian Empire, learn their customs, and represent Earth. The Zarelians were powerful, ancient, and proud. Their empire stretched across hundreds of systems. Humans were still new to the galactic stage, and most species didn't take them seriously. This visit was Earth's chance to change that. As the ship approached the glowing world of Zarenthia, Luke stared out the window, amazed by the golden lights below. The capital planet looked like a jewel floating in space, covered in tall silver. Towers and peaceful blue oceans. Even from space, it was beautiful. The moment he stepped off the ship, everything felt grand. He was met by tall guards in silver armor, who silently guided him through smooth, shining halls. Every corner of the palace seemed alive with light and music. But there was something cold about it, too like beauty. Without warmth, Luke was taken to the grand hall for the welcoming ceremony. Hundreds of alien nobles stood in rows dressed in flowing robes and elegant headpieces. Music played from strange crystal instruments. The walls were covered with carvings of ancient battles and empresses from long ago. Then, she entered Empress Valera. She moved with grace, her long silver robe trailing behind her like soft wind. Her eyes were a light shade of violet, deep and full of quiet power. Her skin had a soft bronze tone that shimmered in the golden light. Her hair, white as starlight, was tied in a single braid. She was young, far younger than Luke expected, but there was something in her presence that made everyone go silent. She stood in front of him, looking directly into his eyes. Luke felt his heart skip a beat. She spoke softly, her voice calm like water. "You are the one from Earth." He nodded. "Yes, I'm Luke." She gave a small nod in return. "Welcome to Zarenthia. I hope you find our empire enlightening." Before he could reply, she turned and walked away. It was short, maybe just a formal moment. But something in her gaze had stayed with him. She looked curious, not cold, and that curiosity pulled at him. The next few days passed in a blur. Luke was shown gardens that floated in the air, libraries made of living crystal, and temples carved into the sides of giant mountains. Everything was amazing, but also distant. He noticed how quiet everyone was around the Empress. No one spoke to her unless she spoke first. No one looked her in the eyes for long. One afternoon, during a tour of the palace, Luke wandered off by accident. He followed a path filled with glowing plants and ended up in a quiet hall with silver walls and a glass ceiling showing the stars. He didn't know it was sacred. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind him. Turned and froze. It was her, Empress. Valera did alone. She didn't call for guards or scold him. Instead, she looked around and then walked toward him. "You shouldn't be here," she said gently. "I know. Sorry I got lost." "Everything looks the same," he said, scratching the back of his neck. She looked at him for a moment. "You're not afraid of me? Should I be?" Valera smiled very faintly. "Most are. Or at least, pretend not to be." "Well," Luke shrugged, "I try not to pretend. I think the stars already have enough liars." "What?" That made her laugh, soft and quiet, but real. "You speak differently than others."
"What?"
"I'm not good at royal words," Luke said with a grin. "But I am good at bad jokes." "A human skill?" "The best one," he replied. She paused, studying him. "You're very strange," Luke smiled. I get that a lot." There was a silence between them, not uncomfortable, but gentle. Then he looked into her eyes, and without thinking, he said with a soft grin, "Do you have a map?" She blinked. "A map? Yeah, 'cause I keep getting lost in your eyes." "Why for?" A moment, she just stared at him, then her cheeks, barely noticeable, flushed a deeper shade. She looked away, and for the first time, the great Empress Valera shyly smiled. That moment ended when footsteps were heard again. A pair of guards approached in the distance. Valera quickly turned back to Luke. Double quotes, go. Now they must not see you. Here. Will I get in trouble? Not if you're fast. He nodded and hurried away, heart beating faster than it had in years. Later that night, as he lay on his soft alien bed, Luke stared up at the painted ceiling. He couldn't sleep. He wasn't thinking about missions or politics or history. He was thinking about her eyes and that shy smile. Luke walked through the palace halls with the other guests, pretending to listen to the guide. His eyes wandered to every corner, half hoping she might appear again. But Empress Valera was nowhere in sight. He thought maybe last night was just a strange dream. Maybe he had imagined her smile. Maybe she hadn't really laughed. But deep down, he knew it was real. When the group reached the high gardens, Luke stayed behind. The others were busy taking pictures or asking about the strange floating plants. Luke sat near the edge of a small pond, staring into the water. He saw his reflection, tired and confused. You're alone again, he turned quickly. She stood behind him, hands behind her back, wearing a simple white cloak. Her crown was gone. She looked less like an empress and more like someone real. Shouldn't you be leading a council meeting or something royal? He asked. I should, she said, sitting beside him. But I needed fresh air and you just happened to find me, perhaps. They sat together in silence for a moment, listening to the wind rustle the silver leaves. What do humans do when they're confused? She asked softly. Eat ice cream? She raised an eyebrow. Ice cream? Is sweet. Cold. Comes in a lot of flavors. It helps when your heart feels too heavy. You have no such thing. Then that's your empire's first mistake. She laughed again, a little louder this time. You shouldn't talk to me like this, she said after a while. Why not? Because no one does. And because if the council finds out, they will question both of us. Luke looked at her. Then maybe they need a little confusion too. Valera smiled. You're a strange man, Luke. You've said that before, 'cause it's still true. They talked for hours about Earth, its oceans and forests, its noisy cities, its quiet deserts. Valera listened closely, asking questions, her eyes wide with wonder. She told him about Zarinthia's history, the stars her people once mapped, the wars they stopped, the peace they now protect. But as they talked, she began to speak of herself, not the Empress, but the girl behind the crown. I was chosen when I was 12, she said. Trained every day to lead. They say I must be perfect. No mistakes, no feelings. Only duty. That sounds lonely, it is. Luke didn't know what to say. Couldn't imagine living that way. No friends, no laughter. No one to trust. Have you ever danced? He asked suddenly. Danced? She repeated, double quotes, yeah. With music. Just letting go. We have formal movements. For royal ceremonies, that's not dancing. That's marching in slow motion then. No, I haven't. He stood up and held out his hand. Then let's fix that. Here, why not? She looked around. The garden was empty, quiet, just the two of them. Slowly she placed her hand in his. They didn't have music, but Luke began humming softly. He took a few simple steps, guiding her gently. She stumbled at first, then laughed. Dan. He laughed too. The stars began to appear overhead, and they danced under them like children who had nothing to fear. For the first time in her life, Valera forgot she was Empress. Just for a while, she was simply Valera. But peace doesn't last forever, as they sat on the grass afterward, still smiling. Two shadows appeared at the edge of the garden. Royal guards. Valera stood quickly, voice calm. Leave us. The guards hesitated. Your Highness, the council? I said leave. They bowed and walked away, but Luke saw the look in their eyes. Trouble was coming. You okay? He asked her. She nodded, but her smile had faded. They will speak of this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get you in trouble. They fear change. They fear anything new. He touched her hand lightly. Not here to ruin your life. You haven't, she whispered. You've reminded me. I still have one. She left quickly after that, returning to her duties. Luke remained in the garden, staring up at the stars, wondering what would come next. The next day, Luke was summoned by the council. He stood in the center of a large chamber, with tall alien figures looking down at him. They wore long robes and had serious faces. "Human," one of them began, "you have been seen alone with the Empress. Yes, you've entered royal spaces without permission, by accident, and shared informal time with her." Luke stayed quiet. "This behavior is not suitable for a guest of your status." And Empress Valera entered. The council stood. "This meeting concerns your behavior, Your Highness," said one elder. "Then let it continue," Valera said, walking beside Luke. "I will listen. Your closeness to this human raises questions about your judgment, about your role." Valera looked at them calmly. "You doubt my leadership? You doubt his influence?" Valera turned to Luke. "Speak truthfully. Why are you here?" He looked around, then said simply, "To learn. To represent Earth. But I didn't expect to meet someone who made me feel less like a visitor and more like a person." The room was silent. "He has not broken any laws," Valera said, "and I have not lost control." The council said nothing for a while. Finally, they dismissed Luke. Outside, Valera joined him. "They will watch us now," she said. "So we stop meeting." "No," she said. "We just become smarter." And with that, she walked away, leaving him with hope burning quietly in his chest. Luke noticed it first, and the Wayguards now followed him from a distance. They didn't stop him or speak, but their presence was clear. Silent, watchful. The palace halls felt less open now, the smiles of the staff more polite, less warm. He understood why. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was something unexpected, something the Empire didn't know how to handle, but he didn't care about that. What he cared about was seeing Valera again. They couldn't meet in the garden anymore, or in the open halls. But Valera found new ways. Sometimes, she left coded messages in his food tray. Other times, a servant would hand him a folded paper with directions written in her delicate handwriting. One night, he followed one of those notes to a quiet corner of the palace's ancient library. Shelves of glowing scrolls surrounded them, and a single lantern lit the space. "You found it," Valera said. Stepping from behind the shelf, "You make these secret meetings feel like treasure hunts," Luke said with a grin. "That's because they are," she said softly. They sat close, their voices low. "They asked me today if I still plan to follow the old path," Valera said after a moment. "They want me to marry a noble from the 5th house." Luke's chest felt heavy. "Will you?" She looked at him. "I don't want to, but saying no makes me seem weak." "You're not weak. They don't see it that way. Then maybe you need to show them something stronger than rules." She looked at him carefully. "Like what?" "Like choice." They sat quietly for a long time. Valera reached into her sleeve and pulled out a small crystal. She handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked. "A recording from the old days. My grandmother used to tell me stories using it. I want you to see them. Our past. Maybe it will help you understand why change is hard for my people." "I'd like that, but don't tell anyone you have it." "My lips are sealed." But she smiled again, that shy smile that still made his heart skip. Over the next week, Luke studied the crystal alone in his room. It showed ancient battles, powerful queens, and a long history of pride and control. The Zarelian Empire had always been strong, but never soft. Every leader had been trained to hide emotion, to see feelings as weakness. He finally understood what Valera was fighting. Meanwhile, the council began to act. They spoke to her more often now, suggesting new paths, reminding her of duty. They invited foreign nobles to visit, hoping one might impress her, but she showed little interest in them. Still, pressure was growing. One day, during a quiet breakfast, a servant passed Luke a small note. "Rooftop garden, sunset, come alone." He smiled and folded the paper away that evening. He made his way to the top of the palace. The rooftop garden was empty except for one figure, sitting near the edge, her long robe flowing gently in the wind. "It's beautiful up here," he said, stepping closer. "This is where I come when I need to breathe," she said. He sat beside her. The sun was setting beyond the mountains, casting gold and purple across the sky. "I've made a decision," she said without looking at him. Luke waited. "I will not marry for politics. Not now, not ever." He blinked. That's bold. It's dangerous, she said. But it's right. What will the council do? They may remove me, but I won't live a life that isn't mine. Luke nodded slowly. I'm with you. She looked at him then. Really looked. You've become important to me, she said. In ways I never expected. He took her hand gently. Same here. Her fingers tightened around his. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Not the Empire, not the guards, not the council, just the wind, the stars above. And two souls finding each other across the great space between worlds. The next day, a visitor arrived at the palace. Lord Evran. From the fifth house, he was tall, confident, and very sure of his status. He had heard of Valera's closeness with a human and came to win her back to proper royal duty. He was polite to Luke, but only just. During a formal dinner, he made a speech about unity and strength. He turned to Valera and offered her a rare gemstone from his home planet, speaking of alliance and duty. Valera accepted the gift, but said nothing. Later that night, she met Luke again, her voice tired. They are trying harder now. They're scared. Yes. He touched her shoulder gently. You're doing the right thing. I hope so. But the days after became harder. More eyes followed them. More whispers spread. The council began to meet without her. The palace, once filled with light, started to feel like a cage. Luke knew time was running out. He had come to learn to represent Earth. But now he had become part of something far greater, quiet revolution in the heart of an empire. And at the center of it was a girl who smiled shyly when she laughed, and an explorer who once made a joke about her eyes. Storm clouds rolled across the skies of Zarenthia for the first time in months. Not real ones. They were part of the palace's skydome system. Still, the gray light matched the mood inside the royal halls. The council had called an emergency meeting. Luke stood alone in his room, staring out the wide window. The gardens below looked smaller today, more distant. Something had changed. He could feel it in the walls, in the air. The Empire was moving, and not in a good way. A soft knock broke the silence. He opened the door and found Valera standing there. She wore a dark cloak with the hood down. Her expression was calm, but her eyes looked tired. I don't have much time, she said, stepping inside. What's going on? You're planning to force me into the bond? Bond. A royal promise. Once made, it can't be broken. You want me to tie myself to Lord Evran? Luke's heart sank. But you said... I said I wouldn't, she whispered. But they are using old laws. They're saying my closeness with you proves I can't lead with clear judgment. That's not true, I know, she said, taking his hand. But truth doesn't always matter here. He squeezed her hand gently. Then what do we do? She looked up at him. Run. Luke blinked. What? Not forever. Just for a while. Long enough to make them see I'm not their puppet. Long enough for me to choose my own path. Where would we even go? There's a transport ship hidden in the lower hangars. It's old, but still works. I can override the guards. We'll leave tonight, Valera. Are you sure? She nodded. If I stay, I lose everything that makes me. Me. He looked into her eyes and saw the fire still burning there. Not fear, but strength. A kind of strength that refused to be shaped by others. Then I'm with you, he said. The night came fast. Shadows stretched across the palace walls and most halls grew quiet. The guests were asleep. Only the guards and council stayed awake, unaware of what was about to happen. Luke waited near the north gate, just as Valera instructed. He wore a simple robe and carried nothing but a small pack. His heart pounded in his chest. Then she appeared from the dark, her steps quiet. This way, she whispered. They moved quickly through the halls, avoiding the main guards. Valera used her handprint to unlock hidden doors and stairways. The palace was older than most knew. Secret paths remained from times long gone. Finally, they reached the hangar. A small ship stood in the corner, silver and round, like a teardrop frozen in air. Valera moved to the control pad and started the launch sequence. Hurry, Luke said, before someone finds us. But it was too late. Empress Valera. They turned to see a tall figure standing behind them, Lord Evran, dressed in his finest robe, flanked by two guards. You're making a mistake, he said calmly. Step aside, Valera replied. You're throwing away your crown. For a human, I'm choosing freedom. The council will never allow this. They don't control me. He took a step forward. Then you leave me no choice. His guards raised their weapons. Before they could act, Valera raised her hand. The room's lights flashed, and a shockwave burst from her bracelet. The guards were thrown back, stunned. "Get in," she yelled. They rushed into the ship, and within seconds, it lifted into the air. The hangar door opened slowly, then burst wide as the small ship flew out into the night sky. Below, alarms began to ring. The stars looked different from outside the capital. Valera sat in the pilot's seat. Breathing fast but steady, Luke sat beside her. "We actually did it. For now," she said. "They'll follow. But they won't catch us easily." "Where are we going?" "A moon called Shyness. It's quiet, outside Empire control. We can hide there. Think. Decide what to do next." He nodded. For the first time, they were alone, with no guards, no walls, no rules. Just the ship, the stars, and the silence between them. After a while, she turned to him. "Are you afraid?" "No," he said. "I'm with you." She smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "I don't know what will happen next." "Neither do I," he said. "But maybe that's the good part." They sat together as the ship moved through space. Leaving behind everything they knew, Valera rested her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, she felt safe. The next morning, the palace was full of panic. The Empress was gone. The council gathered, furious and shocked. Lord Everin demanded action. Search parties were formed. Messages were sent across the stars. "This is treason," one elder shouted. "No," said another, reading the security report. "This is choice." They stared at each other. Deep down, they all knew what had happened. She had made her decision on Shyness, on a dusty moon with soft winds and tall hills. Luke and Valera landed their ship near an old observatory. It wasn't much, just stone walls and a broken dome, but it was safe, quiet. They cleaned it up, made it home for now. Days passed peacefully. They cooked simple meals, watched the stars at night, and talked for hours about everything: life, dreams, hopes, and fears. Valera practiced letting go of her royal habits. She laughed more, wore simple clothes, and tried to learn how to draw. Luke read her Earth's books and taught her how to build a fire. One night, while watching the sky, she said, "I used to think I belonged to the stars. Now, I think I belong where I feel alive." He looked at her. "Where's that?" "With you," she whispered. He didn't reply, just held her hand, because words weren't needed anymore. The sun rose slowly over the hills of Shyness, casting warm light across the stone observatory. A soft breeze moved through the tall grass, carrying the quiet sounds of birds and rustling leaves. Far from the rules and walls of the palace, Valera and Luke began to live a simple life. They fixed broken parts of the observatory and cleaned the inside rooms. Luke found an old chair that still worked, and Valera made a sleeping area near the windows where the stars could be seen at night. Their days were peaceful in the morning. They gathered food from the forest nearby. At noon, they cooked small meals together, laughing when Luke burned things. In the evening, they sat on the roof, looking up at the stars. Valera said she could name every one of them. Luke didn't doubt it. But behind the peace, they both knew it couldn't last forever. One night, as they sat under the stars, Valera leaned her head on Luke's shoulder. He could feel her breathing slow and calm. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The palace?" He nodded. "Double quotes sometimes," she said softly. "I miss the gardens, the books, the quiet halls at night. But I don't miss the eyes watching me. The silence between every word. The feeling of being a statue, not a person." Luke looked at her. "You were never a statue to me," she smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in it. "I know." A short silence followed. Then she added, "They'll come soon. You know, I feel it. They can't let me go. Not without trying to pull me back." "What will you do?" Valera sat up and looked at the sky. "I will face them." "Oh!" "But not as their puppet. This time, I will speak as myself. And if they don't listen," she turned to him, then I lose the crown, but I keep my soul. 3 days later, a ship appeared above Shyness, small, dark, and fast. Viewership saw it first through the observatory's broken telescope. Her face remained calm, but her hands tightened at her sides. They found us. Luke stood beside her. Do we run? She shook her head. No, we've run enough. The ship landed near the base of the hill. 2 figures stepped out, both council members in long robes, followed by 4 guards. Viewership stepped forward to meet them. Luke stood beside her. The taller counselor, an elder named Zalrin, spoke first. Your Highness, or should we now call you Wanderer? Viewership didn't flinch. You may call me Viewership. Zalrin frowned. Left your duty to left your duty, risked everything. No, Viewership said, her voice clear. I left because I was being turned into something I'm not. I chose to live instead of just rule with a human. The second counselor said sharply. With someone who sees me, Viewership replied. Xal Ren stepped forward. The Empire needs you, but it will not beg. I'm not asking it to, she said. I'm offering something better. What could you be better than a loyal ruler? A true one, Viewership answered. One who leads not from fear, but from heart. The guards looked uneasy. They weren't used to hearing such words. You want to return? Zalrin asked carefully. Only, if I can speak freely, live fully, lead with choice, not chains. The counselors looked at each other. They hadn't expected her to stand so firmly. We will take your words back to the capital, Zalrin said, but be warned. Not all will accept this path. Then, let them try, Viewership said. I'm not afraid. The group left without another word. After the ship disappeared, Luke and Viewership sat back down on the roof. Do you think they'll accept your offer? He asked. Maybe, she said. Maybe not. But at least now, they'll know who I really am. You're brave, Luke said quietly. She looked at him. No, I'm just finally free. He smiled. What happens if they do agree? Then, I return to Zarenthia, not as the same Empress, but as myself. And maybe, she added, looking at him with soft eyes, you come with me? He laughed. The human who breaks palace rules and dances without music? Exactly, she said, grinning. They'll never see it coming. He reached over and took her hand. They sat together as the sky turned dark, filled with stars once again. A week later, a message came. It arrived through an old beacon tower. Near the edge of the forest, Viewership read the glowing symbols carefully. Her eyes widened, then softened. They agreed. Luke stood behind her. What? The council? She said, turning to him. They want me back, but with conditions. I asked for freedom to speak, freedom to live, and no forced bond. They actually said yes. They said, it's time the Empire changes. Luke smiled. Guess someone made them think. Maybe someone made them feel. They returned to Zarenthia a few days later. This time, there was no parade. Formal welcome, just quiet steps into the palace that once felt like a prison, but now felt different. Viewership walked with her head high, wearing no crown, just a simple robe. Luke walked beside her, not as a guest, but as a part of her life, the nobles whispered. The guards stood still, but no one stopped her. The council met her in the grand hall, eyes watching closely. But this time, no one dared speak over her. Viewership stood at the center and said only one thing. I am not here to rule like the past. I am here to lead like the future. And the room, filled with power and pride, stayed silent. Not in protest, but in respect. Luke watched from the side, heart full. The girl he once danced with in a hidden garden was now changing a world, and she had chosen him to stand with her. After Viewership returned to Zarenthia, everything began to change slowly. But clearly she no longer sat high on the royal throne during meetings. Instead, she sat among the council as an equal voice. She listened more, asked deeper questions, and spoke with honesty. Many nobles were surprised by this. Some didn't like it. but many others began to respect her in new ways. She was no longer just an empress by blood. She was now a leader by choice. Luke stayed by her side, not as a guard or an advisor, but simply as himself. Still wore plain clothes and used simple words. Yet the people noticed how he made the Empress smile more often, how she walked with lighter steps when he was near. Some still whispered behind their hands. Others said nothing at all, but Valera didn't care anymore. She had spent many years worrying about silent opinions. Now she lived by her own truth. One afternoon, after a long meeting about trade and diplomacy, Valera walked into the palace garden where Luke was sitting under a wide tree, reading from an old human book. "You look tired," he said, closing the book. "I am," she sighed, sitting beside him. "The old ways take effort to change, but you're doing it. Sometimes it feels like swimming against the current." "Good," he said with a small smile. "That's where the strongest fish are." She laughed softly. "Is that another human saying?" "No," he said, grinning. "I just made it up." She leaned against his shoulder. Sunlight came through the trees in golden rays. "What if I stopped?" she asked suddenly. "What if I left all of it behind? The palace, the crown, everything." He looked at her. "Do you want to?" She didn't answer right away. "Sometimes," yes, she admitted. "But then I remember the little girls who look at me and think, if she can speak her mind, maybe I can too." "Then you stay," he said softly. "But only as long as it's still you." She looked up at him. Make it sound so simple. Maybe life doesn't have to be complicated. She smiled, touched by the quiet truth in his words. A few days later, Valera received a message from a nearby planet under Zarelian control. The people were protesting harsh rules forced by older laws. The governor asked for help, but he wanted her to use fear to calm the unrest. Valera refused. Instead, at a public visit, with only a small escort and no weapons, she walked through the streets, met the people, and listened to their voices. She promised changes not by power, but by understanding. Her visit was broadcast across the empire. Many were shocked, an empress walking among commoners, laughing with children, helping an old vendor carry his basket, and by her side was a human, smiling quietly, showing kindness without needing to speak big words. The empire was seeing something new, something real. When they returned to the palace, Counselor Zalrin approached. "Valera, in private, your actions," he said carefully, "have shaken the foundations." "Good," Valera replied. "They needed shaking, but it cannot go on forever." "Why not?" "Because you are still Empress, and tradition must grow," she said firmly, "or it dies." Zalrin paused, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps the empire is ready." "Oh," Valera said, looking out the window. "Not ready, but willing, and that's enough." Later that night, Valera sat on the roof of the palace with Luke. The stars above shimmered like silver dust across black silk. "I never thought I'd come back here," she said. "And now you lead it," he replied. "Do you regret staying?" He looked at her. "Never." They sat quietly for a while, then she asked, "What's your dream, Luke?" "Me," he said, surprised. "I never really thought about it. Think now." He looked at the stars. "I guess, to be with someone who makes me feel like the stars aren't so far away." She smiled and reached for his hand. "You're already there." He turned toward her, his voice soft. "You still never answered my joke." She blinked. "What joke?" "You know, the one about the map." She laughed, remembering. "I never forgot." "So, do you have one?" "No," she whispered. "And maybe that's okay, because if you're lost in my eyes, I'm just as lost in yours." The stars above didn't speak, but something gentle moved in the air too. Souls once from different worlds now sat side by side under the same sky, equal, steady, and forever changed.